Hey everybody, I'm Sam Gross with electricbikereport.com, and this is the Mod City Plus electric folding bike. It's a bike from an Austin, Texas based brand, and we're going to put it through its paces today to see how it performs in the real world. So let's get going. The Mod City Plus is built around a 500 watt rear hub motor that makes 60 Newton meters of torque. We also have a 48 volt, 12 amp hour or 576 watt hour battery that's mounted externally on the back of the frame. You get a 7-speed Shimano Altus drivetrain, which is a very solid group set, especially at this price point of around $2,200 MSRP. You also have a nice display from Mod that's got a little bit of a dated readout, but it gives you all sorts of useful metrics such as how many watts the motor is producing, your speed, time, etc. You also get a set of Tektro Auriga hydraulic disc brakes with 180 millimeter rotors front and rear. That's a great group set. The bike also comes stock with a rear rack that's compatible with mini child seats. It's also got a nice weight rating of just under 60 pounds. And then obviously this is an electric folding bike. It's designed to fold down nice and compact. You have a hinge in the center of the frame. You got a handle post that folds down and the pedals fold up as well. Now, one thing to note about an electric folding bike such as this one is while it may look small on a computer screen, in reality, it's not too terribly small of a bike. You have a nice and decently long wheelbase that at least resembles the wheelbase you'd get on a traditional bike. And you've got a lot of elements where they're trying to preserve the geometry of a traditional bicycle while still having this bike fold down nice and small. It rolls on 20-inch wheels, which are fairly standard for an electric folding bike. And there's lots of other different components on this bike that make it nice and unique and compact and good for transport. But those unique features also give it very unique riding qualities. The bike is very quick, feels snappy, but all in, this is a really nice riding bike. I've been happy with how it performs, but let's see how it performs in all of our tests. So heading into the Mod City Plus's brake tests, I honestly have more questions about how it's going to perform than predictions. And I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. Why I have more questions is because these electric folding bikes typically are a mixed bag of performers in this brake test that we do. And that's because these bikes have a very unique geometry. They roll on 20-inch wheels typically. They've got a very steep head angle. They sometimes have a shorter wheelbase. They're really, really interesting to ride, especially when you're trying to push the envelope on them. And how we do this brake test is we bring this bike up to 20 miles an hour and bring it to a stop as hard as we possibly can 5 times to take the average stopping distance. Now, while I have questions about how the bike might ride and feel under these hard braking conditions, what I don't have questions about is how good the brakes that come stock on this bike are. This bike comes stock with a set of Tektro Auriga E-Comp brakes. These are hydraulic disc brakes with 180 millimeter rotors front and rear. They're very good. They're e-bike specific. They're a brake that we've used several times and consistently had good performances out of, but the brakes themselves don't always determine how well these bikes perform in our brake test. So let's put it to the test and see how this relatively unique electric folding bike performs. While I may have had several questions about how the Mod City was going to perform in our braking test, I couldn't have predicted the answer we ended up getting. Over the course of 5 full power stops from 20 miles an hour, this bike came to a stop at an absolutely astounding average of 9 feet and 9 inches, which bests our old braking record of all of the bikes we've put through the brake test so far by a margin of over 1 foot, which is crazy. I absolutely did not expect that result out of this electric folding commuter bike. Part of the reason I didn't expect that is because the geometry of this bike is so unique. It has a very steep head angle, it has small 20-inch tires, and there's not a lot of weight in the back of this bike. What that means is that I have to get my weight very, very far back to keep this bike from doing a little nose wheelie or a stoppie on those really, really hard braking tests. One thing you're going to notice in watching that video is I stopped quite a few of these brake tests with my rear tire actually up in the air, and that's something I'm comfortable with. I've got over 20 years of experience riding mountain bikes and different bikes like this, but keep that in mind if you do have to do a panic stop or come to a stop really, really quickly on this bike. The other thing that was very interesting was these Kenda tires. This is the type of tire that I never really know what to expect out of. It's fairly wide, it looks to be about 3 inches, and it's got a very interesting tread pattern that quite honestly kind of just resembles flames. It looks like a little bit more aesthetics than a performance-oriented tire. But these things would not skid. They gripped so incredibly well that they actually really contributed to this bike's tendency to have the rear end lift up while stopping. Will you, as the consumer, the average bike rider, be able to replicate that really, really, really short stopping distance? It's very hard to say. I personally think the bike felt a little bit squirrely under that hard of braking conditions. I really had to throw my butt back. I really had to focus on controlling where the rear end was. But for you, who knows? Maybe you can do that same result, or maybe the bike just performs differently for you. But regardless, for our testing purposes, this is a new best stopping distance of all the bikes we've reviewed so far by quite a considerable margin, so a great result from the Mod City. So to get an idea of how the Mod City Plus's 576 watt-hour battery performs in the real world, we put it through a series of range tests. The first on PAS2 and the second on PAS5. And in that PAS2 range test, we saw a range of 49.11 miles before this bike ran out of battery. And in PAS5, we saw a range of 22.31 miles before this bike ran out of battery, which are good results from a bike with a 576 watt-hour battery that's powering a 500 watt rear hub motor. That's a little bit better than a 1-to-1 ratio, which is kind of the rudimentary scale that I use to kind of determine if a bike is going to have a decent range or not. We want to see the battery equal or greater than a number of watt hours than the wattage of the motor itself. So all in all, really nice result from this bike. The Mod City Plus is powered by a 500 watt rear hub motor that makes 60 Newton meters of torque. And like many of the other affordable electric folding bikes that we've reviewed, the thing is surprisingly quick. It's a class 3 e-bike, meaning it has pedal assistance that can power itself up to 28 miles per hour, and it has a thumb throttle that'll power the bike up until 20 miles per hour. And breaking down that pedal assist is 5 different assistance levels that the rider can choose from. Now, we did put this bike through several tests on our electric bike report circuit, and mainly we did 5 laps, 1 for each pedal assist level, and then 1 lap with the motor entirely off to get an idea for how the bike pedals with no help at all. And as we've seen on many folding electric bikes, this thing doesn't pedal super well with no assistance from the motor. We saw an average speed around our circuit of about 12.9 miles per hour average. But once you start to turn the power on and begin to cycle through the pedal assist levels, we see a nice and even jump in speed from one pedal assist level to the next, all the way up to PAS5, which gave us an average speed around our circuit of over 22 miles an hour. So this thing's very quick, but it's got a lot of get up and go, which is something we see very often on 20-inch wheeled electric folding bikes. Those small wheels give this bike an additional benefit of helping with the acceleration. It takes less force to turn them over, it's going to get up to speed quicker, and it makes the bike really, really fun. It just feels snappy and peppy and quick. It's a lot of fun to get around on. Overall, the motor performance has been very good with this bike. We're going to put it to the test on our hill a little bit later in this video to see how it pushes uphill. But on flat land and around our circuit, the thing's fast and fun. When it comes to how they handle and ride, electric folding bikes are a very unique category of e-bike. And I think you can kind of pick up on that just by looking at them. How they look, how they're constructed, and how the wheels fit together, and how the frame corresponds with where you sit and where you hold onto the handlebars, it's all very different and unique. But something that's interesting about this type of folding bike, which isn't designed to be super lightweight and super duper portable, it's more designed to fold up and be stored in a small place or maybe put in the back of a truck or an RV, is it retains quite a bit of the geometry of a traditional bicycle. We see a relatively long wheelbase. You've got handlebars that are high, a seat that is relatively low. It's a comfortable riding position. You're very upright. It's fairly friendly to pedaling as well. But one thing we do see very frequently on electric folding bikes is a very steep head tube angle that corresponds with very small wheels. What that translates to is very, very quick handling, almost to the point where it feels twitchy at times. This is something that I always adapt to very, very quickly when I'm reviewing an electric folding bike. It does feel different from a traditional bike, but it doesn't feel bad. It's just something to keep in mind, especially when you get on one of these for the very first time. You're very likely going to get used to it really, really quickly. Overall, the ride quality in this bike is very good. It has nice and wide Kenda tires that are remarkably grippy, as we've shown in our brake test. It's also got a nice cushy saddle, some relatively wide riser bars, and ergonomic grips. The cockpit is built around the mod bike's display, which is very functional and useful while riding. It gives you all the metrics you're going to want to keep track of, but it does look a little bit dated, especially among some of the other electric folding bikes that we've reviewed. It's definitely an aesthetic complaint. It's not a complaint with how the thing functions, but I just wish it looked a little bit nicer. It's a black and white display. The numbers kind of look like they're from like a 1980s Macintosh computer, but it works. So again, a very minor complaint. The Shimano Alta shifters that controls what gear you're in, very comfortable. All in, it's a really, really nice riding and nice feeling e-bike. To get an idea of how the Mod City Plus climbs uphill, we've brought it out to our test hill, Hellhole. Now, Hellhole is a 12% gradient on average, over 1/3 of a mile of climbing, so it's plenty big and plenty long to put this 500-watt rear hub motor to the test. Now, on PAS5, we're going to do 2 tests with this bike, one on PAS5 and one with the throttle only. And in PAS5, I have quite a lot of confidence this bike's going to clear our hill. But with the throttle, there's no guarantee. 500-watt rear hub motors tend to sometimes struggle up this hill, so we're going to put it to the test and see how it does. All right, so this is the Mod City Plus throttle only hill test on Hellhole. This 500-watt motor makes 60 Newton meters of torque. We'll see what that works out to as far as making it up the hill and what sort of time and average speed we might see out of it. But so far we're doing pretty good. 500-watt motors are definitely not the largest rear hub motors we test on this hill. Usually the 750-watt motors thrive, but this 500 watts doing very well. Definitely seeing it bog down. We're down to 5 miles an hour, but it doesn't really feel like it's going to go too much lower than that, at least on this section. So we're through the longest and steepest section. But the most challenging steep pitch is actually up next. And it's challenging because there's no run up into it. You got no momentum. It's just all motor power. Getting a little speed back before it falls real quickly. I think it's going to make it. Definitely not setting any records on Hellhole today, but I am thoroughly impressed this motor is even clearing the hill. 500-watt motors seem to be kind of hit and miss on this hill, and this one seems to be hitting. And from here, we're home free. It's going to make it. Just chugging along at its pace. All right, so now we're on to the Mod City PAS5 hill test. Just did fairly well in the throttle only test. So let's see how she goes, helping my legs. Burning through the bottom of the wash. Now just cruising up the hill. It seems to be doing pretty good so far. Not having to put a whole bunch of effort into the pedals. When you add just a little bit of leg strength on top, 500 watts goes a whole long way. Just cycling through the gears. Nearly done. There's the top. The Mod City did just fine up our test hill hellhole, even in the throttle only portion of the test, where we saw it clear the top of the hill in 1 minute and 48 seconds with an average speed of 10 miles an hour. And in PAS 5, it cleared the top of the hill in 1 minute and 23 seconds with an average speed of 13.1 miles an hour. These aren't blazing fast times, but they are impressive considering that this hill is very difficult and designed to make bikes fail. We've seen plenty of 500 watt rear hub motor bikes not be able to clear this hill, so it's very impressive when one does. So big kudos to Mod and its 500 watt rear hub motor. Good showing on hellhole. In my experience, electric folding bikes, especially the affordable end of the spectrum, can be a little bit of a mixed bag, especially among the ones we've reviewed. We sometimes get some very strange handling, we get some weird motor behavior, but the Mod City Plus has overall been a very well-rounded e-bike. And in some cases, especially when it comes to how quickly the bike comes to a stop, it's an exemplary performing e-bike compared to the other bikes we've reviewed thus far. The folding mechanism does work well. It's not something that I would personally see myself using very often. We have used it actually on this video shoot today to transport the bike around. It fits in the back of my Subaru Outback just fine. But it's not going to be a bike that, like, say you're going to fold up and take onto public transport. It's not going to fit under your desk at work very well, and it is fairly heavy. So it's not really a folding bike in the sense that you're going to fold it up and commute with it. It's more of a folding bike in the sense that you're going to store it in a small place. Maybe you want to fold it up and put it underneath an RV, or maybe you just want something that'll fit in the back of a hatchback or something like that without having to buy an electric bike rack. This bike is going to check all of those boxes. It's also really fun to ride. It's very snappy, it's peppy. That 500 watt rear hub motor that Mod chose for this bike does a really nice job. And overall, the handling is just fun. Again, that handling does take some getting used to. It's a little bit on the twitchy side, but all affordable folding electric bikes do ride like that. All in, I think Mod did a really nice job with the City Plus. It's a very nice riding e-bike and had a lot of fun reviewing it. If you like this e-bike and you're interested in learning more about it, be sure to click the link in the description below this video for a more detailed review where you can find all the data that we collected on it through the review process. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to the Electric Bike Report channel for more updates on Mod and the other brands we cover. For Electric Bike Report, I'm Sam Gross. Thank you so much for watching.